Leonard was born in 1894. His parents were Mr. and Mrs. James T. Bulman, and he was born in Union City Township. He was a farmer until elected sheriff sometime before 1940. He was elected to take office again in 1941. When he passed away, he was serving the last year of his present term as sheriff. He was replaced by his wife, Martha, who became the first female sheriff in Albuquerque County. I feel astounded to have the opportunity to write about him because he happens to be my great-great-grandfather. A complaint had been filed to the Paulsville town marshal that William Garricky had been threatening other people in his apartment building over the Balt's Tavern. On an insanity warrant, Sheriff Leonard J. Bulman rushed to the apartments with his deputy, Peter Hendrickson, of Waukon, and Eldo Garricky, Paulsville town marshal. Garricky wouldn't answer when they first knocked on the door, but finally asked what they wanted to know. Leonard Bulman tried to convince him to open the door, but he said he could hear what they had to say from outside the door. Sheriff Bulman told him if he didn't open up, they would have to break in the door. It was reported that Garricky replied with,
"It'll be bad for you if you do."
The nephew of William Garricky, Eldo Garricky, warned Sheriff Bulman that William kept a loaded double-barrel shotgun handy. Gas bombs were fired into the building to force Garricky out by Fayette County Sheriff A.J. Kuchat and his deputy Martin Blockus. The effort was said to have failed, and then officers sent a crossfire into the building. Inspector Mueller located Garricky's body lying in the hallway just inside the door. Near to his body was the double-barrel shotgun. It had been reloaded. It is not known who fired the shot that killed Garricky. Garricky was brought to his apartment drunk that night. It was not until near midnight before the bodies of Garricky and Bulman could be taken out of the building. The event took place over a 4-hour period, and it is estimated that 2,000 people watched the proceedings. "Come on, Pete, we're coming in," Bulman said, and then broke down the door with his shoulder. The flimsy door gave in quickly, which caused Bulman, followed by his deputy Peter Hendrickson, to stumble in, almost falling to his knees. William's first shot hit Sheriff Bulman, and the second went between Bulman and Hendrickson. Hendrickson says that Bulman got to his feet and walked through the door and down the hall to the Lewis Hardin Gardner's family's apartment, where he collapsed and died almost instantly. Hendrickson escaped immediately through an inside stairway to call a doctor for the sheriff and get a shotgun from his car. And now an interview from Leonard Bulman's son, Charles Bulman.
Oh, gee. Well, I don't know. Of course, I was raised in the courthouse, just about,
Yeah, we could just
back
talk about
in the
that.
30s, and I was about 5 years old or so. And I went to school first and second grade in Waukon, but then we moved back to the farm. But, and of course, Dad was sheriff back then. It was, well, pictures of the old jail.
Really?
And that was before, back in the 30s. That's
Wow.
the way the whole jail was. And that was where the Best Club is now. It was, there. And it was one of the guys that were
Okay.
in jail drew those.
Really?
Yeah, and I forget what his name was now. I think it's on there someplace, but I don't know just where it was. George Reddy, I guess it is, or something. Badge, everything.
Yeah. It's cool.
Growing up, living at the courthouse, then your mother was the cook, and
Yeah, she was a cook, and she had well, back then, she'd have some trustees, you know, guys that you could trust. They'd help her peel potatoes and stuff. We had one guy that escaped from jail back then, and he had a trustee trace the key for the door, and then back then they had a wood stove in the jail, and he had a piece of wood, got a piece of wood, and he whittled out a key, and he got it opened the door,
Really?
and I got the key. And it was quite, well, I don't know, he headed for Postville, because he was from Postville. And he said that he seen Dad a couple times that day, because he was walking and he crawled under one of these cattle passes down here in Yellow River on the way to Postville. And he seen Dad go by it 2 or 3 times that day looking for him, you know. But Dad didn't find him then. He got back to Postville, and then he went to Chicago. And
By train or?
no,
No?
he had a car over there
Okay,
in
yeah.
Postville. And they caught him in Chicago, and Dad had to go in and get him in there, then bring him back. But I went with him a few times, you know, when he's looking for somebody, but rode along or drove, helped drive. It's, and then, of course, he was in for 4 years there. And then, back in the 30s, he went back farming, and then in the 40s, he run again and got in. And he was on his last term, and
Yep.
he's gonna quit again, but here's a picture of me.
Which one's you?
On
This.
the police force. I worked on the police force for, 3 or 4 years.
Remember you talking something about bringing bottles?
Oh,
Uh,
that was back in the 30s. And I was just about 4 or 5 years old. Of course, back then there was a lot of bootleggers, and it was in Prohibition time, and Dad would break up the stills, and they'd bring the bottles home in gunny sacks, you know, because they didn't want all the glass laying out there. They'd bring them home, and you had them in the shed out there, and I'd take my wagon and load up some those whiskey bottles. And there used to be a guy up, his back, you remember where Mahoney's Tavern was?
It's,
On the corner?
yeah, you
It's
wouldn't,
gone
but
now,
it's like
but-
where Walk-On State Bank is,
Yeah,
it'd be in the
it's
south
right on the lower
end
corner
of there.
Yeah. Well, there's a big, it's a livery lot, livery stable, up in the parking lot behind it, you know, where the parking lot is
Yep.
now. There used to be a building that went around the 2 sides of it, with just a roof and then mangers, and you could take your horses in and tie them up there. And there was, of course, he was a caretaker. He had a little house, a cabin out in the middle there, just a shack,
Yep.
being in the daytime. And I'd take my bottles and go up there, and he'd sell them. He'd buy them from me, recycle them.
Mhm.
They'd go back to the bootleggers again. And then I'd go down to Klingle's Candy Kitchen. And Klingle had a store where they just made candy, you know. I'd go down there and buy candy. The money.